Axiom of Choice by Literally Mad Lad on AO3. Summary. After being found by a salmon fishery, Katsuki is placed in a government facility for research. Much is unknown about mermaids, but with Deku's help, Katsuki is able to communicate and also escape. Episode 1. Chapter 1. Big Sexy Science Man is here to the rescue. Katsuki's only indication of time came from the passing of sun overhead. At one point, he had learned to rely on the clocks in the wall outside of the warped, bubbly glass of his metaphorical testing tube. The clock that Deku and his colleagues would wear on their watches irritated his sensitive ears. Deku stopped wearing his watches over 365 days ago, which was approximately the number of times the sun had passed over. Katsuki no longer lived in testing tube-shaped capsule, but he remembered it. It had been just large enough to fit 3 humans, suspended in water. It was just large enough to fit Katsuki and the extensive length of his scaled, thinned tail. He used to keep his tail coiled at the bottom of the tube. It had taken months for that poor posture to correct itself. His vertebrae had yet to fully readjust. Much of his tail had grown in that confinement, and for that reason, the end of his tail was peculiarly crooked. When Katsuki was first found, it was on the deck of a commercial salmon boat off the coast of Alaska. The fishery had reported him, and the flock of injury and terrestrial scientists came shortly therefore, nearly put the fishery underwater. In terms of finances, that is. The area Katsuki's body was found was scouted for coastline to coastline, and prompted an uproar among the fisheries in the area. When no other significant discoveries were found, they made their way with Katsuki in a tank, and that was the end of it. Katsuki hadn't seen the Gulf of Alaska since he was a teenager. Approximately 3 years, and an innumerable amount of needles and injections later, Katsuki met Deku. Or rather, Izuku Midoriya, as he was called by his colleagues. Deku was on an internship at first. He had heard about Katsuki's case through the grapevine of NDAs and confidential papers. A real-life mermaid man. Whatever it was the tabloids once tried to gain traction with. The stories were quick to fade out of the general public eye. No one really believed it. Deku believed it, though. Deku proceeded to do everything he could to simply get in contact with Katsuki. Katsuki vaguely recalled the first day he saw Deku. They wouldn't meet for another week and a half while Deku's paperwork went through. It was one of Katsuki's least favorite days. He was groggy and nauseous, and hadn't been able to sleep since the clock's small hand was over the 2. It was the first 2 of the day, which meant it was morning. The most interaction he'd had was done over the periods he was unconscious, so he wasn't entirely sure what that entailed. These days only happened once every couple of weeks, when the clock's small hand had gone over the 2 42 times. He was awake, though, to see the lab door open. Katsuki's eyelids were heavy, stomach cramping, and muscles aching. It felt like something had punched him in his arm repeatedly with a rock. It left him sluggish and borderline unresponsive when an unfamiliar face stepped into the room. He didn't get too many of those. This kid was bright-eyed and had all the energy of an overexcited puppy. Not that Katsuki had ever seen a puppy before. All curly black hair, an olive-toned face textured by a splatter of dark freckles. Katsuki assumed the glasses hadn't been cleaned, so they might not have been freckles at all. The guy was talking to the project lead, animatedly, all hands and broad gestures. There was something premeditated about the gestures, though. They were oddly specific, and Katsuki hadn't noticed any other scientists use their hands that way before. Almost ritualistically. Katsuki frowned, and then the guy noticed him. That glow Katsuki had seen before dissolved in an instant. The guy's smile wavered, left in an awkward in-between state of shock and horror. It wasn't until the project lead took a few steps towards Katsuki that the stranger even approached. It's a bit groggy right now, the lead said, staring up at Katsuki, as Katsuki put a hand to the glass. The weight of his arm was heavier than usual. This morning we had to take it out of the tank, bi-monthly cleaning, and blood samples. And no name still, the guy said, eyes never leaving Katsuki's. Katsuki was too distracted by the freckles. It's like someone had taken a paintbrush to the guy's cheeks. The lead said, we shortened the subject name to Zero. Makes documentation easier. I see. The last time Katsuki had seen a new human's face, it was just before a biopsy. They had flown someone in to study him for a quarter and perform the surgery. The human laid a hand flat on his chest before raising 2 fingers on either side and tapping them together, twice. He followed up with his pinky, raised in a quick, sweeping gesture. My name is Izuku, he said. He smiled when Katsuki slowly blinked at him, dumbfounded by how distracting this guy's hands gesture was. Deku went on with some more motions. I'm here to teach you how to communicate, okay? Working with Deku was odd. The first day Katsuki seriously spent with Deku, he was slightly less foggy-headed than usual. It had been several days since his injection, which was odd. They never missed a day. I know you can understand most Spanish and some English, Deku said, still distracting Katsuki with his hands. It was difficult not being distracted by them. They were peppered with bright white scars, paler than the rest of Deku's otherwise tan skin. The scars were even more distracting than Deku's ridiculous freckles. But Katsuki gathered what the bastard was telling him. He narrowed his eyes. There was a reason he kept his intelligence to himself. He was getting better with English, and now to use numbers. Specifically, as well as the obnoxious mouth of technology the project lead used with her underlings. This didn't change the fact that he could physically speak the language back. He knew he couldn't, because they had tried, and now his vocal cords were fucked up to some degree. There is a version of spoken language that has the same linguistic properties, but you don't have to speak it to use it, Deku said. Have you heard of sign language? Katsuki simply stared back. He had never heard of it before. Like hell he complied with this cocky bastard, though. Deku was patient, though. When Katsuki remained unresponsive that day, he simply came back the next day, and the next, and the next. Despite Katsuki's physical and verbal silence, Deku began conducting lessons in earnest. He learned about grammar and sentence structure. He even learned that there were other languages, ones that he might never understand, and ones closer to what he was familiar with. There's a difference between Deku and the other idiots on the project. Katsuki was hesitant to lean into it, though. While the exams were less straining, Katsuki was still kept on lower conscious frequency. The general grogginess he felt was still there as he wrapped his head around Deku's physical language, all while remaining aloof and unresponsive. It made the project lead frustrated, but that was usually when it came to Katsuki's general disdain for giving her a reaction. Every now and then, Katsuki began witnessing her increasing frustration with Deku as months went by without progress. I know he's... If you cannot produce a single word by the end of this week, I can't afford to have you in our study. Katsuki watched the lead walk off, her heels clicking on the tiles. She casted one last annoyed glance in Katsuki's direction, before shutting the door behind her. Deku had yet to turn back around, but Katsuki's keen hearing could gather that Deku was crying. Deku brushed his tears aside, though, and reassembled his resolve. When he turned back around, the only indication of breaking came in the form of pink eyes and cheeks. Okay, I know what to do, he said. And then, Deku approached the tube, where Katsuki hovered in the large coil of his tail. Deku put a hand on the glass, his eyes wavy and concerned. You aren't gonna like this, but it's for the best, Deku promised. He followed up with a smile, as a sense of unease pulled in Katsuki's gut. I promise things will be better after this week. Just trust me. It took just one day for Katsuki to realize what Deku's plan was. He hadn't eaten in over 24 hours. Every now and then, there was the typical before the exam, but he wasn't due for an exam, as far as he was concerned. Deku was adamant on teaching him sign language, for terminology around the test tubes, and were due to perform, which often came in the form of actual, literal schedule. Deku would have told him if one such exam was taking place, if only to teach him the word for it. Katsuki simmered in a boiling pot of fury. As if being antagonized wasn't bad enough, Deku seemed to assume Katsuki was easily irritated by having his intelligence degraded, which he was. He couldn't believe Deku would take it this far, to put his health on the line, and that the people involved considered it. Deku came back the second day, and without any spoken words asked, "Tell me what you want." It took a severe amount of self-control to stop him from flipping Deku off. "I cannot give you what you want if you don't tell me what it is." Deku sighed. "Fuck you," Katsuki thought, feeling simultaneously nauseous and empty, as if there wasn't anything in his stomach to feel nauseous about. The thought of even getting what he wanted felt unappeasing. Until the third day. Katsuki's tail had lost its color and turned a sick sort of iridescent gray. It lost its shine on the fourth day, when he finally broke. Deku was barely through the door when he froze at the sight of Katsuki, swung into the floor of the tank, the tips of his fingertips, one hand pressed on his lip. Katsuki's nails had been capsized years ago, after he'd severely injured several appendants and gave a near-fatal, poisonous cut to another. The hardened, scarred pads of his fingers tapped at the pale lips again. Deku came in shock to wave at Katsuki's handler over to get him food. Katsuki was ravenous. Before captivity, Katsuki would shed his teeth annually, after his new ones would grow in, sharper than before. After captivity, his already pale scales turned even fainter, and his teeth dulled until the exact moment he was given food when asked. The duller caps on his teeth shedded off with a single bite. They cracked and splintered away from his gums, and by the second helping, Katsuki was sporting a fresh set of sharpened teeth. He devoured the oversized bait in less than 3 bites. All the while, Deku stared at him in awe. Katsuki found the guy's fascination less greedy than the other scientist. Deku marveled. The others grew irritated with Katsuki's attitudes over the years. They were extortionist. Deku was enraptured. Katsuki had his folded claws hooked on Deku's nerdy little heart. This could be useful, Katsuki thought, especially as it occurred to him that the rest of the team had yet to understand the advantage Deku held over him. Language. A form of it that the rest of the team didn't know. Deku was his translator. Katsuki didn't exactly have a reason not to talk now, and not just engage his handlers to keep Katsuki's food all to himself, taunting him. It happened the very next day before Deku's shift was due, and one of the handlers asked Katsuki to say something, which he didn't, which prompted his food to be teased just out of reach after the lid was lifted. The top of the tank was encircled at a distance by a metal walking path. At one point, when Katsuki used to have his claws, he had been able to hook the railing. Now, he couldn't reach it. One of the attendants let out a startled laugh when Katsuki bared his teeth. "The new teeth are mildly terrifying, wouldn't you say?" "I heard the speech pathologist kid called dibs on the old teeth," the guy said, waving the marvel aback by the smooth underbelly. It was still alive, beady eyes wide, and mouth agape. The mark lay graved in a Grecian toss, prompting the worker to drop it off the side of the railing. Katsuki nearly lunged for it, but it was too late. Katsuki shot a glare up at the guy, fingers cursed tightly on the lip of the tank. "That was the last one," the attendee said, slapping his coworker in the arm. Katsuki flipped them off. In a maze, startled gasps spread between them. Did you see that? Amazing! The kid really is onto something. The door of the lab slammed shut. Katsuki startled, glancing back to see none other than Deku crossing the tile. Deku's expression was flat as he approached the tank, and the now dead fish on the ground. He reached down to grab it and tossed it at Katsuki's waiting hands. You two can leave, Deku said as he checked his watch. I have the room until 3. Right, have fun, Doc. One of them said as the other waved. The two of them descended the tracks, while Deku climbed it, arriving at eye level with Katsuki around the same time the two workers vanished from the room. The door rattled behind them. Deku sighed as he sat cross-legged on the metal grate. He flattened his notebook on his lap and sighed. I'm sorry you have to deal with them. Katsuki merely glared. He flickered the spine of the marvel over the glass ridge before ducking underwater, up to his nose. His eyes blinked slowly, his hawk raiding slowly as his eyes began to dry out. From what Deku had mentioned about the member, it was white and made it appear as though his irises and pupils vanished when it didn't retract immediately upon blinking. This was the bastard who got the bright idea to starve Katsuki. He knew he shouldn't have trusted Deku. Deku's brows pinched with guilt. I'm sorry, really. I know you don't want to talk, but it's the only way I can see you. Like I care, Katsuki thought. Can I continue teaching you? He signed, eyes bright and cautiously hopeful. Katsuki closed his eyes and sunk. His hair lifted and slowly dipped beneath the surface after him. Deku leaned against the railing to peer down at him, and when it became clear that Katsuki wasn't coming back up for air, Deku chased him down the stairs, notebook in hand. The second Deku's feet hit the ground, Katsuki returned to the surface. Deku sighed and ultimately decided not to play this game. Katsuki folded his arms over the ledge, still scowling, and made sure he faced away from Deku as Deku shouted, I tried playing nice! Deku marched around the tube to where Katsuki had his eyes focused on the wall ahead, pointedly ignoring Deku's puppy dog stare from the ground. Deku just went on, not speaking a word as he signed just how sorry he was. Katsuki scowled, just ticking. He wanted to see what Deku was saying, but that meant looking at the bastard. Eventually, Deku had gone on for so long following Katsuki around the tank in hopes of getting him to watch his apology that Katsuki relented at the simple spelling of the word escape. I definitely didn't see that right, Katsuki thought. He was intrigued enough to glance at Deku. I can't help you escape if we aren't on the same page. Deku signed. At least Katsuki thought that's what he saw, but as he signed it, Deku verbally said, I can't help you if we aren't on the same page. He's fucking with me, isn't he? Katsuki thought. Let's start with something simple, Deku said. Can you tell me your name? Katsuki had a name, but it wasn't something he could sign with the tools Deku had given him. He shook his head as he tapped his index finger and middle finger to his thumb before twisting his wrist, index finger lucidly intended. No translate. It doesn't translate, Deku repeated, with proper LSG grammar. Katsuki nodded his fist. Yes. Deku beamed at him, stepping closer. Okay, that's good. I mean, that isn't good because I can't use her name. Can you show me it anyways? It was at a frequency Katsuki wasn't entirely sure Deku could hear, and when Deku didn't respond to it, Katsuki sighed. I just said it. I thought I heard something, Deku confessed with an apologetic smile. I guess my ears aren't good enough. Do you mind if I record you? They spent the rest of the time working with Katsuki's handlers, or rather, Deku spent the rest of the time that way. Getting clearance to drop Deku's equipment into the tank was more complicated than Katsuki thought, and it took another week before Deku was able to record anything. Katsuki was muzzled for the occasion, and his hands would have been bounded if it weren't for the fact that Deku still needed him to sign. The microphone was caged and lowered into the water. Katsuki didn't particularly enjoy the buzz it gave off, or the fact that he needed to wear a cage over his teeth. The microphone would have been shattered by now if his teeth were given access to it, though. He sighed. I don't like the noise. I know you don't. Just humor me for 5 minutes, Deku said. Katsuki glared at him. Deku looked up from his computer a moment later to meet Katsuki's furious glare. Could you tell me your name again? Katsuki did, and Deku's assistant pointed to the screen. Deku tapped a button, and the buzzer went away. They fiddled with the audio clip before recording another. Katsuki leaned closer to hear when Deku and his assistant put on their headphones. The audio was muffled, but when Deku caught sight of Katsuki's eyes on them, he turned his computer screen to show Katsuki the digital wavelengths. When Deku tried to play the audio on the speaker for him, Katsuki thought his eardrums might erupt. That can't be my voice, Katsuki thought, irritated, as he rubbed at his sharp, flattened ears. I think we could work with this, Deku's assistant said. This is proof that there are others, and that they socialize. Why else would he have a name? He understands Spanish, Deku reminded her. He could have had contact with humans before. Yeah, because a human would give him this name, she said, gesturing to the headphones where the audio clip was still playing on repeat. It was muted, though, and less irritating to Katsuki's ears. Katsuki glared at her as she made off with a sample of the clip and promised to show it to the project lead. Could you say my name? Deku asked, and when Katsuki didn't answer, Deku flicked on the microphone again. Katsuki winced and put up his middle finger, and Deku laughed. The months went on. Deku spent the majority of his time charting Katsuki's language and speech patterns. For the study director, this was all in hopes of understanding where, specifically, Katsuki orientated. They had the general location, Peruvian sea caves, and that was a chance that they could trace the vocal patterns of Katsuki's people like a radar. It would be easier to find more of his kind the more they expanded on his library of vocals. The sea caves off the coast of Peru were discovered in the early 2000s, and its intricate web was estimated to measure over 400 kilometers. It was the largest known networks of sea caves, rivaling the Isura Peru Sea Aturn and Dos Ota cave system. As far as the scientific community was concerned, the Peruvia caves were where Katsuki grew up. How he wound up in Alaska was another story entirely. It was all theory, until some recordings were discovered approximately 50 feet off the coast. It was during this discovery that Katsuki woke up in the dead of the lab's off hour to the sound of a door opening. His eyes focused, the glow reflecting off the glass as two silhouettes stretched into the room. Neither of them turned on the lights. A cart was being wheeled into the room, its creaking garnering on Katsuki's eardrums. Someone hissed to be quieter. One such individual approached the glass, eyes turning to meet Katsuki's. Deku, and he came with that damn assistant of his. Deku signed to him. We're gonna get you out of here. Okay. Katsuki signed back. I am pretty sure that that is gonna be the only chapter we do that is full. And actually, technically speaking, I was supposed to cut that chapter in half because I like to do 10 7-minute videos nowadays because I'm gonna be doing a lot more videos and stuff like that. So I need to limit myself. And because the pattern I used to have where I would do like 20-minute videos, 30-minute videos, and I would do like 4 series, I cannot continue doing that. That is atrocious. Love y'all, but I love my mental health too. Thank you very much. But what's it called? This was a very interesting series. We're starting it off. I am super interested. I really love mermaid stories and stuff like that, and like mermaid ex-human kind of thing. It's always so interesting and stuff like that. It's like Romeo and Juliet, but it's not family that's keeping them apart. It's literally being different that's keeping them apart. And I really, really love it. I really, really love it. It's one of my favorite tropes. So I am really excited. And I've seen like Izuku be the mermaid in some of these, but like Bakugou mermaid, that's a different level. I give him a red tail. I don't know how, big his tail is. Also, I don't know how to draw mermaids. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm like, shit, I have to draw Katsuki shirtless. You know how hard that shit is? He doesn't even have nipples. Mans don't have nipples. He doesn't have nipples. Motherfucker he looks scrawny. I drew that in like less than an hour. I'm gonna be honest with you. Less than an hour and I drew that. Yeah, I think the only thing of that I like is the scale texture that I did. It wasn't necessarily like scales, but I tried to do a scale texture kind of thing. But what are we thinking so far? Give me a second, I need to open the door for Storm. He's starting to do his little sit next to the door and wait for me to open it bit. He sits next to the door and then he waits for me to open it. And he's like, please open. Sometimes he meows, but this time he didn't meow. He just sat there and looked at me. I think I noticed that he doesn't meow as much when I'm recording. It's only when he really, really, really needs my attention. So I feel like that's less of a he needs to go use the restroom and more of a I want out of this room. Because for the most part, unless I'm not recording, he doesn't meow as much unless it's urgent. Which I don't know how the hell he learned that. He just did. Cats are smart. Anyways, as I was saying, this is really interesting. I thought we would have a little bit more of Izuku being I thought it was going to be Izuku being a scientist. No. Izuku's a translator, which, okay, interesting. I should have picked that up on the fact that Katsuki was mute. I should have, been like, okay, there's going to be JSL, right? There's going to be JSL. But I didn't pick that up. That's my bad. I'm really interested, since the next one I'm guessing is going to be him getting, him escaping. Which, I mean, it is super goddamn interesting. Also, it's not like Katsuki's been here for a short amount of time. 3 years. This is really interesting because I thought it was just going to be like he gets captured, Izuku's a scientist who's there, one of the lead ones maybe even, or like, just like an underling or something, and then like, helps helps Katsuki escape, and that's like the escape is in the middle of the story, and then romance is towards the end kind of thing. No, he's escaping next chapter. Next chapter is gonna be chapter 2, releasing the Kraken into his lovely underground enclosure. Huh. I'm gonna read a random one. Katsuki gritted his teeth. Fang blared and nose throbbing. He lurched up out of the water with a snarl. The threatening clicks of his jaw came out without warning. It was a defense mechanism he hadn't used in months, and something that always unnerved his handlers. Interesting. Flight or fight. This is interesting. This is just interesting. So it's interesting because I just realized, I think maybe Izuku's assistant is Yaoyorozu, because Yaoyorozu, All Might, is one of the characters, and then Bakugou Mitsuki and Bakugou Masaru are there. Obviously, I understand why they're there, but I think maybe, is All Might the head lead? No, the head lead's a woman. Never mind. How does All Might go in there? And Yaoyorozu, Momo is in here. Is Momo the assistant? I'm also, I'm one of those people who, okay, so I have this weird thing where if somebody touches something that's mine, I get super pissed off. And it's like, it's like, So like just the thought that they're discovering his voice, his vocal things to then find more people, it's pissing me off because it's like, do not stop. I hate humans sometimes. I do, I really do. And I really hope that I don't think there's mermaids out there, but if there's any creature similar or super mystical like that they never get found, because we do not deserve that. There's certain animals that I wish were never found because they're no longer with us because we fucked it up. If there's alien life out there, I really hope that we don't find them, because I fear the shit that we're gonna do to them. I don't fear them doing shit to us. I fear us doing shit to them. I fear us colonizing them. I'm looking at you, England. Anyways, as always, my raindrops. Make sure to eat, sleep. Before. Not every episode is gonna be this long. This is the only episode that's gonna be this long. I think I'm gonna always have the first chapter always be longer than the rest. Anyways, as I was saying, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.